Regardless of where you fall on a 4-year-old story here in Kansas City, I do hope that we all understand that there are unintended consequences of this story that in large part came to a conclusion, potential conclusion, I should say, yesterday. Welcome in. Happy Wednesday, 6:05. Yes, KCMO Talk Radio now on your FM dial at 95.7. Hit that preset. That way you're joining us each and every morning here on KCMO. So yesterday, news came out late in the afternoon that Eric DeValconaire, former KCPD detective, was convicted back in 2021 of second-degree involuntary manslaughter and armed criminal action. Well, that was upheld yesterday in court. That conviction was upheld yesterday in court. KCTV5, of course, as was every local news outlet on the story. Here's part of their initial reporting.
DeValconaire was convicted of killing Cameron Lamb back in 2019. Lamb was backing a truck into his garage at the time. DeValconaire testified that he thought Lamb was reaching for a gun at the time of the shooting. The former detective was convicted of second-degree involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 6 years in prison, but DeValconaire had remained free on bond while his appeal was pending.
So that appeal came to an end yesterday. Now, there's still a chance that the governor of Missouri, Mike Parson, could end up just ultimately saying, you know what, I'm going to give him a pardon. That's possible, but that's not where I want to start the conversation right now. Where I want to begin the conversation is going back to 2019 and going step by step through what happened with Eric DeValconaire and Cameron Lamb. And the conclusion that we should all come to here is that regardless of whose side you're on, there will be unintended consequences in Kansas City when it comes to cops doing proactive policing. It will not be done at the levels it needs to be done to keep this city as safe as possible. It won't be. Because cops are going to be very hesitant and very skeptical of doing any kind of proactive policing as they see Eric DeValconaire head off to prison and his life ruined and his family's life ruined over what happened back in 2019. So let's go back to 2019, shall we? You know, some of you weren't in town. Some of you might have forgotten the story. We got this big 100,000-watt FM stick on 95.7, and, you know, you don't get this kind of stuff on the FM dial typically, this kind of, fact-based, methodical approach to the news in Kansas City. You just get the woke crap, John.
I was going to say, you mentioned some may have forgotten. You could have been paying attention, but facts evaporated quickly.
Well, that's a great point as well.
Narrative, so
they
did recount them all. Yeah.
Yes, exactly right. And, you know, just to be a fair arbiter of the news, I'm going to use the Kansas City Star here, going back to 2019. All right, that way I'm not making up any facts. I'm going to go back to the Kansas City Star piece from almost 40 years ago now. A recap of what happened involving Cameron Lamb and Eric DeValconaire. The Kansas City Star writes here on the day that he was killed, Cameron Lamb had been arguing with his girlfriend. The argument became physical. And at one point, they left the residence with Cameron Lamb chasing after her. So you have a guy who is physical with his girlfriend and then begins a car chase after her. Lamb then received a call from another roommate telling him to return home. Meanwhile, the Kansas City Police Department was investigating a crash, not involving Lamb, separate. They reported a red pickup chasing a purple Ford Mustang. Officers in a police helicopter spotted the truck driven by Cameron Lamb and followed that vehicle home. So this guy's getting abusive with his girlfriend, arguing, becomes physical, and then he's chasing her through neighborhoods in Kansas City, Missouri. From what I heard, and this is not in the Star piece, but we're talking 100-mile-an-hour chase here, from what I heard from KCPD sources. So that's where we're at right now. DeValconaire and his partner, Troy Schwalm, were nearby and responded. As they arrived, Lamb was backing his pickup into the garage in the rear of the house. Schwalm testified that he thought Lamb was trying to hide it following the chase. Prosecutors allege the detectives did not ask for permission to walk onto the property, nor did they have a warrant. That's important right there. Why? Well, I understand it's a fine line. If you want proactive policing and you know that somebody was just involved in a high-speed car chase through a Kansas City neighborhood, which, by the way, puts a lot of people at risk. How many dozens of people, if not more, were put at risk by this high-speed car chase going through Kansas City, Missouri, and no one has any idea why? If that's your children playing in the street, on the sidewalk, in the driveway, as my kids do, and you got people blasting through neighborhoods at 100 miles an hour, you know what? I don't want to know what's going on there, too. So prosecutors allege the detectives did not ask for permission to walk onto the property, nor did they have a warrant. Moreover, prosecutors allege there was no evidence that anyone had dialed 911, that anyone was hurt, or that a crime had taken place by the time they had arrived. Well, as far as I understand, if you're going 30, 40, 50 miles over the speed limit, we have a speed limit for a reason, right? I mean, we knew that much at the very least. But anyway, let's continue with the star piece. Merritt, who lived with Cameron Lamb at the white and red brick single-family residence, testified that neither detective identified themselves as police officers or were given permission to walk on the property. DeValcanaire pointed his service weapon at Merritt as he walked towards the back of the residence. Well, once again, you're a cop. You don't know what you're walking into. DeValcanaire reportedly knocked over a barbecue grill and a car hood to get to the backyard. Before he was shot, Lamb had his left hand on the truck's steering wheel and his cell phone in his right hand, prosecutors say. He did not have full use of his left hand as a result of an injury sustained in 2015. Schwalm testified he saw Lamb's left hand on the steering wheel and he flayed out his fingers. He instructed Lamb to turn off the engine and get out of the pickup. At that point, Schwalm said DeValcanaire yelled, "He's got a gun, he's got a gun." Schwalm had told investigators Lamb was not armed, prosecutors have said. At trial, Schwalm tried to clarify by saying, "I was involved with someone who tried to kill me." DeValcanaire fired 4 gunshots in rapid succession that smashed through the front windshield and struck Lamb in the chest and the upper torso. He testified he fired the shots because he saw Lamb point the weapon at his partner. The shooting transpired within 9 seconds of the detectives arriving at the front yard of the house. Prosecutors alleged during the trial that Kansas City police staged the crime scene and even planted evidence to support their claims that Lamb was armed moments before he was shot. Merritt testified Lamb kept the gun found by investigators near his body on the 3rd stair from the bottom of a stairway that led to the basement near the garage. Prosecutors alleged the gun was moved from a set of stairs near the garage and placed near Cameron Lamb's left hand after he was shot and before crime scene investigators arrived. Prosecutors also alleged that bullets found inside Lamb's pockets at the Jackson County Medical Examiner's office had not been at the crime scene. So they allege, prosecutors do, that DeValcanaire and his partner set up the crime scene. I wasn't there and you weren't there. What I do know is this. The implications of this story will have an impact on Kansas City policing for years to come. The same people who are going to cry, "We need proactive policing. We need proactive policing." We're more than happy to throw Eric DeValcanaire in prison. And maybe he deserved it. Once again, I wasn't there. But there is going to be a proactive backlash here that is not going to be in the best interest of the people that need the cops the most, who should want proactive policing the most. And, of course, there has been a community response to all this in the wake of yesterday's upheld conviction of Kansas City Police Detective Eric DeValcanaire. There are talks, yes, of a potential pardon by the governor of Missouri. I'm not going to hold my breath on that. I don't think it's going to happen, but that's where the conversations are at right now. And we'll have more on this throughout the morning here on KCMO Talk Radio, now on FM at 95.7. Welcome in on a Wednesday morning as we get this show rolling. Coming up, I got to give credit to Josh Hawley, Missouri U.S. Senator. He's grilling an important organization that is in large part in charge of protecting young women. We'll tell you what that is next. I got to give credit. We haven't talked about this in a while, and thank goodness it's kind of fallen by the wayside. But I'll tell you what, got to give credit to not just Josh Hawley, our Missouri U.S. Senator, but also to the new head of the NCAA, Charlie Baker. Now, you might know you might not know Charlie Baker. You might say to yourself, why should I care about Charlie Baker? Well, the reason you should care about Charlie Baker is because even if your kid is on his way or on her way to be a Division III athlete, doesn't have to be a big basketball star at KU or a football star at K-State or Mizzou or anything like that. But if you have a child who is set to play college sports at any level, you should be very encouraged by what Charlie Baker had to say yesterday on Capitol Hill. He was up there and he addressed a lot of issues that I'll get to here, but the one that stood out to me is when Josh Hawley from Missouri grilled NCAA President Charlie Baker, who used to be the governor of Massachusetts, a Republican, by the way. Crazy to think that Charlie Baker was elected governor. Massachusetts is a weird state. Heck, they've had Mitt Romney. They've had this guy, Charlie Baker. They've had Republicans as governors, but they're way out there when it comes to their U.S. senators. Like, how do you have a Republican governor and Elizabeth Warren as your U.S. senator? That's just insane to me. But anyway, Charlie Baker was asked about Leah Thomas. Leah Thomas, Will Thomas, was the individual who swam at the University of Pennsylvania a couple of years ago now, was a biological man, was competing as a woman, and was winning races left and right. And also was being allowed to change in women's locker rooms. So Josh Hawley brought this up to Charlie Baker, the new president of the NCAA, and here's what that back and forth sounded like. I give them both credit for this.
Earlier this year, this committee heard testimony from a 12-time All-American swimmer, Riley Gaines. She testified that in March of 2022 at the national championships where she was swimming, she was forced to share a locker room with a biological male, Leah Thomas. Let me just read from her testimony. In addition to being forced to give up our awards, our titles, and our opportunities, the NCAA forced me and my fellow swimmers to share a locker room with Thomas. Let me be clear, we were not forewarned. We were not asked for our consent. And we, the women, did not give our consent. Is that still NCAA policy?
Well, first of all, I'm not going to defend what happened in 2022. I wasn't there. I was still governor of the Commonwealth. What I will say is we have very specific rules and standards around the safety and security of all our student athletes, and anyone who hosts one of our national championships has to accept that they know what they are and then abide by them accordingly.
But and does that include female athletes having to share locker rooms with biological males not being warned or consent? Are they asked for their consent?
I don't believe that. I don't believe that policy would be the policy we would use today.
Currently not in
correct.
Yeah.
All right. So that was Josh Hawley and NCAA President Charlie Baker. And Charlie Baker gave, listen, in corporate woke America, Charlie Baker gave a very good answer. He said that's not the policy that we would adhere to today, where Leah Thomas can walk in and let it all hang in a female locker room. That can't, even if you are someone who supports Leah Thomas, by the way, competing against women, which I don't, but if you're someone who does support that, at the very least, you would think in the interests of, the biological women, This individual is not changing in their locker room. At the very least, you would give me that, right? I would like to think. So Charlie Baker saying, yeah, the policy from 2022 where you had Leah Thomas competing against and changing with biological women as a biological man, no, we would not adhere to that. Now, he's kind of saying it in a very nonchalant, very careful way, but the point to me stood out. In an era when a lot of people in his role would not say what he just said, that stood out to me. And good on Josh Hawley for bringing it up, because once again, if you are someone who, whether it's your daughters, whether it's your nieces, your granddaughters, whoever it is, and they're playing college sports on any level, it's not about being a star at the D1 level. Any level, this could happen to them now. So you want to make sure that the NCAA is on record saying, that's not the policy we would be adhering to today. So at the very least, that made me feel better about things. Now, meantime, something else on this note that I'll give Charlie Baker credit for is what he said when it came to condemning Hamas and their attack on Israeli civilians. He put out a statement saying, we stand with the people of Israel and condemn the violence perpetrated by Hamas. The innocent lives taken and the families destroyed by these acts of terror are horrific and difficult to comprehend. And at a time when major institutions in this country and colleges will not only not say a word about it, but will be sympathetic to pro-Hamas rallies and protests happening on their campus, that's also a welcome sight. Now, that being said, the war has continued to get uglier, including a bombing of a hospital yesterday. We'll get to the details on that next. Well, by now you may have seen the news, and you heard at the bottom of the hour there on Fox News that President Joe Biden, who is in Israel today, does not believe that Israel is behind the bombing, the explosion that took place at a hospital in Gaza on Tuesday. And by the way, the more that comes out, the more that suggests Israel is not behind that explosion at a Gaza hospital. I know some of you who are very much sympathetic to Palestine. In fact, I think at this point you're just pro-Hamas. You're pro-terrorism is what I would say about you. You're going to find every excuse in the book to try to blame this one on Israel, because that's what you want to do, right? I can't convince you otherwise. If you want something to be true in 2023, you can find a corner of the internet that will tell you it's true. It's one of the sad realities of the moment that we find ourselves in. And because the news media, in large part, doesn't have any credibility, they've hurt themselves. And I don't feel bad for them one bit, but they've hurt themselves. Combine it with the fact that you can find anything you want on the internet that will confirm every single one of your beliefs. And that's how we end up in the situation that we find ourselves in. So what we know is that there was this deadly blast at Al-Hali Arab Hospital in Gaza. And Palestinians are saying that there were at least 500 people, including staff, patients, and civilians, who were killed via this explosion. These are individuals who had taken refuge inside the hospital following an evacuation order from Israel. Because remember, Israel, for all the talk about war criminals, Israel actually does this decent thing where it says, hey, this is where we're targeting. Please get out your innocent women and children and civilians. We're targeting these locations and these things for a very specific reason. And we're warning you. We're giving you plenty of forewarning to get the innocent folks out of there. And why are they targeting some of these places? Well, because Hamas likes to hide its weapons in hospitals, in schools, and in mosques. That's what they do. That's been their MO for a very long time, right?
Right. That's the obvious play as to what's happened here. We could see this coming, right?
Yeah.
It was all in their script.
It was all in their script. Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. You knew that they were, looking at some of these places, but then the question is, what exactly happened on Tuesday, and who was it? Was it truly an Israel attack on Hamas on this hospital, or was it a misfired rocket launch by Hamas? That's what we don't know. Now, President Biden was in Tel Aviv, and he is saying that he believes, and essentially the U.S. government believes, that it was the result of a misfired rocket launch by Hamas. Now, to give you a little background on this, 30 to 40% of Hamas's rockets misfire and land short in the Gaza Strip. So they don't have, the best rockets, as Trump would probably say. Not the best rockets in the world. He would say something like that, and he would be right to point that out. A lot of their rockets don't do what they're supposed to do. So that's a little-known fact that should be added into the conversation when talking about what took place on Tuesday. Now, whether or not it was misfired or purposely done by Hamas, I don't know. But there's more and more evidence suggesting that what took place was actually a misfired rocket. Now, some are going to say that it was done on purpose, that Hamas wants to basically kill its own people to get more attention and more publicity and more support on the worldwide stage. They want to point the finger at Israel. Anything to make Israel look bad, they will do, including killing their own civilians. Those are the allegations. And by the way, those allegations have been proven true in the past. Whether or not it's true here, we don't totally know yet. But that's right now where this conversation stands.
Yeah, I don't know if it's want to, but it's not above them.
Oh, correct. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. They're not against killing their own people to try to garner sympathy for their movement. Yeah, that's absolutely right. They have no problem doing that. So what we have right now is we have live footage of a rocket falling. We have contemporaneous Hamas audio as well, and I will put this up on my Twitter X page, @PeteMundo, if you want to see it there. I just retweeted it. There is video of the scene showing the explosion is from the parking lot and that the buildings are intact. There's no crater. There's no building demolished, which is fairly inconsistent with the type of bomb that many were suggesting yesterday. And there's drone footage as well from the before and after that shows the same as what I just mentioned, which is also inconsistent with an airstrike. So just know, first off, where you're getting your media sources right now or where you're getting your information, what media sources you're using matters. You are seeing the squad members, the AOCs, the Rashida Tlaibs of the world. Of course, they are using this as a chance to condemn Israel because that's what they do. They are anti-Semites. They hate Israel. And they're going to do what they're going to do. They're going to push their propaganda. Rashida Tlaib putting up on her X page yesterday, Israel just bombed the Baptist hospital, killing 500 Palestinians. And then she tags Joe Biden, saying, "This is what happens when you refuse to facilitate a ceasefire and help de-escalate. Your war and destruction only approach has opened my eyes and many Palestinian Americans and Muslim Americans like me. We will remember where you stood." That is, I don't know if that's a threat from Rashida Tlaib to Joe Biden, but clearly you've got the anti-Israel, anti-Jew faction of the Progressive Democratic Party, and unfortunately it's a growing voice, it's a growing number of folks who are out there just jumping on the Hamas propaganda. Ask yourself, if you're just buying what Hamas is selling, maybe you should question it. Even if you want it to be true, maybe you should question it. That's the only thing I'm going to point out on that front. All right? 913-408-7957. Mundo in the Morning, now on FM at 95.7. That's right. Hit that radio preset. I know a lot of you are still new to this as we get a brand new era going here on KCMO Talk Radio. 913-408-7957. That's also the studio line and the text line here on KCMO. Let's go to Bonner Springs. I know KCMO is now coming in great on 95.7 FM. What's up, Dennis?
Man, Pete, it comes in Topeka. I was in Topeka yesterday listening. I wanted to, you were so right in your comment about knowing your source, because the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, has a channel on YouTube, and they have shown the evidence about this rocket.
Yeah.
And It's just sad that the information, like you said, know your source, kind of like Miss Betsy in ninth grade told us.
Yeah.
Know your source and know your source's motives.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's your source. You know their motives because they're putting out the truth. They're giving you pictures of it.
Yep.
So
They
anyway,
are.
hey, good job getting a signal that I can finally listen to.
Well, Dennis, thank you very much, my friend. That is well done. Yes, clear out to Topeka up there. I mean, nice and clear in Bonner Springs up to Leavenworth. I mean, goodness gracious, we were hitting parts of town that we just really couldn't penetrate on that 7:10 a.m. stick. So here we are on a Wednesday morning. Welcome in. It's great to have you on board on KCMO Talk Radio. I'm Pete Mundo, now in FM at 95.7. It really is fairly pathetic when you see the far, far right and the far, far left coming together on this, basically because they hate Jews. I mean, it's really that simple. So they believe the propaganda from Hamas they want to believe. Coming up, one of our local media outlets continues to embarrass itself on this very front with this very issue on this topic. We'll tell you what the latest example of that is coming up, 6:44. Pete Mundo on KCMO, now in FM at 95.7. Well, yesterday was a great day for Kansas City on the news front, and I am confident that we had it for you first here on KCMO in the 9 o'clock hour. Just, having a bit of a sports background, I like to keep track of this stuff, but this is really an economic story as much as it is any sports story, and that is Brett Yormark, the Big 12 commissioner. He was here yesterday in town. They're doing Big 12 basketball media days down at T-Mobile Center yesterday and today. Yesterday was the women, today's the men, so you're going to have Bill Self, Jerome Tang. All those folks are going to be down there at T-Mobile today. And Brett Yormark gives his kind of state of the conference deal yesterday, and he said that they are looking to keep the Big 12 tournament in Kansas City into the next decade. Here's what he had to say.
Kansas City has been a great home for the Big 12 basketball championships. Because of that, we are currently in discussions on an early extension to keep the Big 12 basketball championships right here in Kansas City at T-Mobile Arena through 2031. While nothing is definitive at this point, we are excited by the prospect of calling Kansas City home for years to come. We hope to finalize this by the start of the basketball championships next spring. We are committed to the Kansas City community and continue to further integrate ourselves.
Now, that is outstanding news. If you've been around this town for any period of time, you know that week, downtown, T-Mobile, Power and Light, it is one of the great scenes of the year that Kansas City has to offer. You get the Iowa State fans coming down, drinking the whole place at a Busch Light. Obviously, KU has an enormous presence, K-State as well. And, depending on who else is good that year, you get a lot of people coming in from out of town to Kansas City to celebrate and watch some basketball. To me, that's always the unofficial start of spring. When you get to Big 12 tournament week, now sometimes it's snowing like it was the last 2 years, Big 12 tournament week, but it's the unofficial start of spring in my book. And there was this concern that with the Big 12 expanding and with Brett Yormark coming in as commissioner, he started last year, and with him being a guy who is from New York City and isn't a Midwest guy, that, he'd be wanting to move this thing around. He'd want to go back to Dallas where it was for a hot minute, 10, 15 years ago, and it was a total mess, by the way. Ask people who went. Or maybe go to Vegas or Phoenix, or there was some rumblings of like New York or Orlando. But Brett Yormark came last year to his first Big 12 tournament, and he realized what this city offered. So I'm following this on social media yesterday, and there were a lot of new fans of this conference, or future fans of this conference, I should say, like Utah fans, who are all bent out of shape. Utah's going to join the Big 12 next year with Colorado, Arizona State. And I mean, these, we got to go to Vegas. Vegas, that would be a terrible time. I mean, unless it's Mark going because he wants to place a 25-way parlay or something like that, he might have himself a good time. But, you can do that on your phone on the Kansas side of the state line, Mark, so I don't want to hear it.
That's right. I'll do it before I go to the T-Mobile Center.
Exactly. You place your bet on Kansas, and then, you go into Missouri. That's how it goes, John.
Well, you're in Vegas. You can go to the basketball game, or it's all you can eat crab legs down here at the hotel, right? So I flip a quarter.
Gentlemen's club to wrap up the night, I guess, if that's your kind of thing. You can.
It'd be one of 100,000 things to do.
That's exactly right. And that's, I was actually, not to name drop, but I was watching the Big 12 tournament last year with Brett Yormark. We watched about a half of basketball together. And by the way, really good guy, really sharp guy, like where the league is going under his direction. But he even brought up to me some, concerns about Vegas, which is what John just mentioned. No, not the gentlemen's clubs, all right? Relax. But what he brought up was the fact that you've got 2 to 4 conference tournaments going on there during that same week. You don't go to Vegas and feel like, wow, it's Big 12 tournament week, right? It's Vegas. When you come to Kansas City that week, you know this town is all in on the Big 12 tournament. You know that. You can feel it. You go to the airport. You go anywhere around town. You look at the billboards. You know it's Big 12 tournament week in Kansas City. You get to own this town and own this environment. And it's a heck of an environment to own. When you watch these other conference basketball tournaments on TV, I mean, they look so stale, lame. The place isn't even full.
The players' parents are there.
Yeah.
Right?
That's it. And you can, hear the guy up in section 232 heckling the coach. Hey, coach, put in Johnny Jones. You can hear
the
him.
usher crack the beer. It's like,
yeah.
Whoa.
That is so true. They have no juice at these conference tournaments outside of the Big 12. And then I'm a little biased when I say this, but the Big East tournament used to be great. It lost some of its luster when it lost some of the big programs. But that scene was rocking at Madison Square Garden back in the heyday of the Big East.
Absolutely.
When, St. John's, Georgetown, Villanova. It's lost some of that, but it still got it. But right now, the best scene in college basketball when it comes to conference tournaments is the Big 12 here in Kansas City. And a lot of these new Big 12 fans or future Big 12 fans were knocking, why are we going to go to Kansas City? We should go to Denver and Dallas and Vegas.
Cincinnati,
yeah.
Salt Lake City.
Come here first, all right? Experience it here first before you start complaining about the Big 12 tournament staying in Kansas City. That's my rant of the day on that front, John.
Well, they obviously haven't heard about the new airport.
Well, that's true. By the way, speaking of sports and sports betting, Mark, did you see this? An NFL bettor, Mark likes his little $5 parlays to win $500. Did you see this? An NFL bettor hit a $15 parlay to win $68,000. Did you see this one?
I didn't see that one.
Yeah. So let me share this with you here because you're going to get jealous. Gosh knows what Mark would do if he hit a $68,000 parlay. We wouldn't see him for 2 weeks. He'd been a full-blown bender.
I'd get taxed. That's my most nervous thing if I win big.
You've been around me too long, Mark, when you start worrying about the taxes on your $68,000 win. But I like where your head's at. $15 wager on FanDuel turned into a $68,000 payout. The bet hit when Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts plunged into the end zone for a rushing touchdown, which was the most likely leg of the parlay. The 4 legs of the parlay, which was part of the late afternoon slot of NFL games on Sunday, came together as follows at the 4,544 to 1 odds. Here we go. You're going to have to tell me who some of these guys, or which teams they play for, Mark. Jacoby Myers scored the first touchdown in that game.
Raiders.
Okay. I'm trying to think of who they were playing Sunday. But anyway, Jacoby Myers for the Raiders scoring the first touchdown in that game. Amon-Ra St. Brown. Lions scoring the first touchdown in that game. Cooper Kupp. Rams,
yeah.
Right? Scoring the first touchdown in that game. And then Jalen Hurts scoring the first touchdown in the Eagles game. A $15 parlay for $68,000.
First touchdowns if you get the first touchdown, that's like plus 650 usually for the lowest odds. Like Jalen Hurts was probably the most likely.
Yes, it was.
Plus 600 or something like that. That's crazy.
He hit a four-way parlay, or someone hit a four-way parlay predicting the first person to score a touchdown in the 4 afternoon games on Sunday. $15 to win $68,000. How about that? You got to step up your parlay game there, Mark. That's what you got to do.
Anytime touchdown parlays, I got to hit one of them.
Oh, man. Mark is going to be jealous all morning about this story. I will have a huge personal announcement that I will share with you after 8 o'clock. I think it's bigger than our flip to FM last Thursday, but that's just me. I'm biased when I say that. That's coming up in 20 minutes on KCMO. Next, Show Me Institute. They always join us on Wednesday mornings. Patrick Ishmael is going to be here. What do we make of the Royals potentially getting direct payments from Jackson County to stay in Kansas City, Missouri? He'll join us on that coming up next on KCMO Talk Radio, now on FM at 95.7. Boy, this show is flying by. 9:05. We got an hour until Ray Stevens takes over at 10 o'clock. So are you getting set for retirement? Maybe you are. Maybe you're not. Maybe you think you should be. Maybe you wish you were. Well, regardless, the U.S. gets a C+ in retirement, according to a new ranking that is out. That's right, a C+. Now, you might say, oh, boy, wow, USA has to do better. Well, not necessarily, unless you want to see more government involvement in your retirement, which I want to see less of that, not more of that, John.
Now, hopefully these statistics don't count Brett Favre and Tom Brady. Yes, how many times have they may be inflating the stats a little bit.
Well done. Nice reference. Take the rest of the show off there, John. Tip your cap and call it a day. So the U.S. gets a C+ for retirement per this new ranking that came out from Mercer CFA, Institute Global Pension Index, released yesterday. U.S. came in 22 out of 47 countries. Now, the way Americans fund their retirement is primarily through Social Security and any 401k plans. That setup has some major shortcomings, particularly when it comes to long-term solvency, according to the report. They write here in the U.S., there's good coverage of white-collar workers through employer systems. But what about gig workers? What about the blue-collar workers? In many countries, including the U.S., an even greater share of the responsibility for retirement security now rests on individuals, said Margaret Franklin, president and chief executive of the CFA Institute. Yeah, and what's wrong with that? Nothing as far as I'm concerned. Wow, you mean it's your job to save for your own retirement? Oh, my goodness.
Talk about a bombshell.
Whoa, there's a novel concept. Now, the article goes on to note in the Netherlands, which was number 1 on the list, where all workers have both a private and public pension account, it ranked at the top of the list, followed by Iceland and Denmark in the top 3. And you hear this a lot from many folks who want to see more government. They say, oh, man, look at the quality of life, Sweden, the Netherlands, Iceland, Denmark. Oh, the government takes care of them with these generous pensions and la, 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 la. Yeah, they're also like a couple million people, right? They're very small geographical areas with super low populations where you can get away with that to some degree in an easier manner than what you have here in the U.S. They also have tax rates, by the way, that are sky high, well over 50% in large part compared to the U.S. So do you want that here in the United States where already you've got the top 10% in this country paying well over 50% of the taxes? It's like 70, 80% of the taxes are paid by the top 10% of wage earners in this country. Top 1% is paying 50% of the taxes. Do you want more of that to allow other people to potentially retire earlier or something along those lines? We've got a completely broken system here, by the way, is what we have. Anybody who tells you, hey, you know what? I think that we got to figure out how to get out of $33 trillion in debt. Well, yeah, join the club. A lot of Republicans say that when they don't have power, by the way. And then when they do have power, they whistle past the graveyard because they don't want to touch what has become the third rail of politics, and that is Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. They don't want to do it, despite the fact that it is 60% of the budget. So when I see this report come out that says the U.S. ranks 22nd out of 47 in retirement plans, I'm like, you know what? If they're going to do it based off of which countries the government helps fund your retirement the most, then I want to be 47th out of 47. That's what I want to be. I want to be in a position where more money that you earn is being used to your liking. I want to be in a situation where the more dollars that I earn, I get to decide where they go and what their future is. And you know what? If I want to save for retirement, great. But if I want to buy a fillet of fish every day, I should be able to do that too. Because this is America, damn it. And if I want to eat crappy fake fish, then by golly, I deserve to do that too. Sorry, I had to take the fillet of fish dig. I apologize, John. John's going to get a fillet of fish today after the show.
That's okay. I'm going to have Mark go ahead and forward you a picture.
You don't want me throwing up mid-show now, do you?
Oh, I might.
Yeah, true. You would actually enjoy that. Yeah, that'd be getting back at me. But imagine if we did this, right? Imagine if we took the Social Security system for those under the age of 45. Let's just throw out a number there, right? If you're over 45, keep what you got, keep the system the way it is. But for those of us under 45, or maybe even those of us under 40, whatever the magic number is, imagine a system where all your Social Security monies, and if you look at your pay stub, you will be blown away by how much of your paycheck is going to Social Security, which right now is just robbing Peter to pay Paul. That's all it is. I mean, it's a Ponzi scheme. That's how it works. It has to be. Imagine if you had that money invested automatically for you into something like a 401k style plan that, let's just say, it ran through the government or it ran through a state, kind of like a 529 plan that many people use for their kids in colleges and saving on that front. And then when you turned 60, 62, 65, 70, whatever the age was that you could start accessing it, you had all of that money from your working career that was returning on its investment as it was getting larger and larger and larger. And you had that money, and it was yours. And if you started pulling it at 65, and God forbid you dropped dead at 67, you could give it to your spouse, to your children, to whoever. Imagine that versus what we currently have, which is you start drawing Social Security at whatever age you want, and God forbid something happens to you. Well, boy, you worked your whole life, and you got a few months of Social Security, and boy, I hope it was worth it for you. You got nothing to show for it. Imagine if you had a 401k style pension plan, whatever, through the government where your money was following you and you had control over your money. Wouldn't it be such a better system? Instead of hoping that you live long enough to start collecting Social Security checks. George W. Bush tried to do this 20 years ago now, and unfortunately it fell flat on its face. Why? Because fearmongers always start screaming, he's trying to take away your Social Security. Trying to give you more control. Trying to let you have money that outlives you, instead of hoping you live long enough for the government to start cutting you checks. And when I see us ranking 22nd on this retirement poll from Mercer CFA Institute, I'm like, 20 seconds good, but sign me up for 42nd if you're doing this based off of government involvement in retirement, because that's partially how we got ourselves into $33 trillion in debt. This notion that the government needs to somehow be responsible for our futures. And there has been no worse policy than thinking Social Security is or was at any point the answer. 913-408-7957, 913 on a Wednesday morning on KCMO Talk Radio. We are now on your FM dial at 95.7 The president is addressing the nation, addressing the world from Tel Aviv as we speak. Do you have that in there on Fox News, Mark? You see that live? Can we pick that up here just for a couple of minutes? Let's see what Pops is saying there.
Babies, and not scream out for justice. Justice must be done. But I caution this: while you feel that rage, don't be consumed by it. After 9/11, we were enraged in the United States. While we sought justice and got justice, we also made mistakes. I'm the first U.S. president to visit Israel in time of war. I've made wartime decisions. I know the choices are never clear or easy for the leadership. There's always cost, but it requires being deliberate. It requires asking very hard questions. It requires clarity about the objectives and an honest assessment about whether the path you're on will achieve those objectives. The vast majority of Palestinians are not Hamas.
Jeez.
Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people. Hamas uses innocent families in Gaza as human shields, putting their command centers, their weapons, their communications tunnels in residential areas. Palestinian people are suffering greatly as well. We mourn the loss of innocent Palestinian lives like the entire world. I was outraged and saddened by the enormous loss of life yesterday in the hospital in Gaza. Based on the information we've seen to date, it appears the result of an errant rocket fired by a terrorist group in Gaza. The United States unequivocally stands for the protection of civilian life during conflict, and I truly grieve for the families who were killed or wounded by this tragedy. The people of Gaza need food, water, medicine, shelter. Today, I asked the Israeli cabinet, who I met with for some time this morning, to agree to the delivery of life-saving humanitarian assistance to civilians in Gaza, based on the understanding that there will be inspections and that the aid should go to civilians, not to Hamas. Israel agreed the humanitarian assistance can begin to move from Egypt to Gaza. But let me be clear. If Hamas diverts or steals the assistance, they will have demonstrated once again that they have no concern for the welfare of the Palestinian people. And it will end.
Hold on. How is he going to possibly know that? So he's saying that the UN, other countries need to give monies to help the Palestinian people. The country or whatever, Gaza is run by Hamas. If you think we're going to give money to terrorists who just slaughtered 1,400 people, including babies and kids, and they're going to use it for a just cause to help their own people, the same people who they are blockading from leaving the parts of Gaza that have been and will continue to be bombarded by Israel. How are you going to check? What are you going to go through the books of the Hamas terrorists? Hell, let's make sure you're using it on food. What is this tough guy talk that has no backbone to it?
No, is that because if they do that, well, they'll just demonstrate they don't care once again.
Gosh. Yeah. You need another example of them not caring about humanity?
Right. And shouldn't there have been some kind of a, deterrent offer?
Yes.
Rather than saying, well, they just, shame on them.
Shame on them. All right. Let me go back to him. Let's just continue with Joe Biden here, live from Tel Aviv.
Arab, Jew, Muslim, Christian, everyone. You can't give up what makes you who you are. If you give that up, then the terrorists win, and we can never let them win. You know, Israel's a miracle, a triumph of faith and resolve and resilience over impossible pain and loss. Think about October 7th, the Jewish holiday, where you read about the death of Moses, a tragic story of a profound loss to an entire nation. A death that could have left hopelessness in the hearts of the entire nation. But though Moses died, his memory, his message, his lessons have lived on for generations of the Jewish people as well as many others. And just as the memory of your loved ones will live on as well. After reading the story of Moses' death, those who observed the holiday began reading the Torah from the very beginning. The story of creation, reminds us of two things. First, that when we get knocked down, we get back up again, and we begin anew. And second, when we're faced with tragedy and loss, we must go back to the beginning and remember who we are. We are all human beings, created in the image of God with dignity, humanity, and purpose. In the darkness, to be the light unto the world is what we're about. You inspire hope and light for so many around the world. That's what the terrorists seek to destroy. That's what they seek to destroy. Because they live in darkness. But not you, not Israel. Nations of conscience like the United States and Israel are not measured solely by the example or power. We're measured by the power of our example. That's why, as hard as it is, we must keep pursuing peace. We must keep pursuing a path so that Israel and the Palestinian people can both live safely, in security, in dignity, and in peace. For me, that means a two-state solution. We must keep working for Israel's greater integration with its neighbors. These attacks have only strengthened my commitment and determination and my will to get that done. I'm here to tell you the terrorists will not win. Freedom will win. So let me end where I began. Israel, you're not alone. The United States stands with you. I told the story before, and I'll tell it again, of my first meeting with an Israeli prime minister 50 years ago as a young senator. I was sitting across from Golda Meir at her desk in her office. And she had a guy who later became prime minister, sitting next to me, just before the 1973 Yom Kippur War. And she flipped the maps up and down, telling me how bad things were and how terrible they were. All of a sudden, she looked at me and she said, "Would you like a photograph?" I looked at her. She got up from her desk and walked out into that hallway. I think it's marble flooring. Walked out in the hallway. We walked out and there were a bunch of photographers standing in front of us. We were standing shoulder to shoulder. And without her looking at me, she said to me, knowing I'd hear her, "Why do you look so worried, Senator Biden?" And I said, "Worried? Like, of course I'm worried." And she looked at me and she didn't look. She said, "We don't worry, Senator. We Israelis have a secret weapon. We have nowhere else to go." Well, today, I say to all of Israel, the United States isn't going anywhere either. We're going to stand with you. We'll walk beside you in those dark days. And we'll walk beside you in the good days to come. And they will come. As you say in Hebrew, which I'm not going to attempt to do because I'm such a terrible linguist, I'll say it in English. The people of Israel live. The people of Israel live.
The guy can barely speak English, never mind another language.
Jewish and democratic state. Today, tomorrow, and forever. May God protect all those who work for peace. God save those who are still in harm's way. Thank you very much.
All right. Yeah. God, and in the famous words of Joe Biden, come on, baby. God save the Queen.
God save the Queen, man.
Thank you very much. All right. 9:22. That was Joe Biden addressing the world from Tel Aviv here in the last few minutes.